What's up guys, Crash Potato here, bringing another video focused around the Anvil Terrapin. However, this time we're looking at the Anvil Terrapin's Q&A that we got yesterday. So obviously I've already done a video sort of discussing the Anvil Terrapin, however that's its concept. So a lot of what I said there was speculation just from what we can see, what we're looking at and what we can speculate. And the Q&A tends to clear up a lot of that speculation. It tends to put a lot of speculation to rest because they give some solid answers. They don't always give very solid answers, but they give enough of a solid answer to either further speculate or put the speculations to rest. So let's get straight into the first question. So the first question is the Terrapin modular in any way? Can the center seat be removed to make room for cargo or other modules? See question below about cargo. So the answer to this is no. The Terrapin's scanning station is plugged directly into the upper and lower utility mounts and provides the operational heart of the ship. As a military hardened exploration and reconnaissance ship, its role is firmly in data gathering. So this puts to rest any sort of modularity speculations, which I personally had, and I mentioned it in the first video. I was hoping that you could get rid of that center seat and change this into a cargo ship, because as I said in my first video, I would love this ship as a cargo hauler, as a small little light cargo hauler. It would be insanely useful, in my opinion. I would feel extremely vulnerable in any cargo hauler, no matter its size or role. Even something like a freelancer, I would feel rather vulnerable, whereas in this, I'd feel pretty safe with my cargo. So let's move on to the next question. So the next question is, what type of signature can we expect the Terrapin to give off? And the answer to this is, a medium-sized component has the potential to create a large signature for a small ship. In making it heavily armored, the ship just doesn't have the capacity to vent its heat as efficiently as players would want. The revolutionary reacting armor allows the panels to lift apart, weakening the ship but providing venting, allowing players to effectively come up for air. Now, this is one of those questions that you always get, well, not the question, but the answer that you always get in a CIG Q&A. It doesn't necessarily answer the question, and it just sort of further speculates. So, I mean, I don't know if I'm just reading that wrong, but to me that doesn't really answer the question very clearly. So the answer is that a medium-sized component has potential to create a large signature for a small ship. But then they talk about it not being able to vent heat as effectively as pilots would want. But then they talk about the revolutionary armor allowing it to vent heat. So they sort of talk about the possibilities, the reality, and then further possibilities. So that is just sort of more to speculate on. So the next question, moving on from that, is, does it have an ejection seat for the pilot and or the crew, and or a crew escape pod? And the answer is no. The pilot and operation crew will escape through the side door. Ejection seats tend to require a soft spot to launch out of, while many other small fighters can perhaps blow the canopy. Ships like the Terrapin were designed to not compromise the hull integrity by making an ejection seat egress point. So you're not going to be able to quickly eject from this ship. Now, I would assume with the design of it, you're not going to need to quickly eject from it. It is going to be the case of, you know, you're going to be able to get out of any situation, I would assume. But, you know, if you do get in that situation, you are not going to be able to eject. You're going to have to go out the side door. So the next question is quite an interesting question. How does the Terrapin compare to the Freelancer 2? So for those that don't know, the Freelancer 2 on paper seems very similar to the Terrapin, except for the heavy armor and the reconnaissance role. Though the Freelancer 2 could potentially also fill a reconnaissance role with its scanners. But yeah, so the Terrapin is tough as boots. It's designed to be able to handle any eventuality in the dark unknowns of space. From a military perspective, it's also extremely unusual as a recon ship, able to survey fleet movements and sustain a lot of direct fire if discovered. The Terrapin's secondary use is a way of insert or rescue people from combat zones is also highly appealing. So this is another one of those questions that doesn't quite get answered like the people would want, because again, it doesn't really answer the question as how it compares to the Freelancer. It sort of just talks about the Terrapin. It doesn't talk about the Freelancer. So, you know, they described it as being tough as boots, which the Freelancer 2 is also described as being pretty tough, and is designed to handle any eventuality in the dark unknown of space, which the Freelancer 2 is also described to be able to handle. Recon ship, the Freelancer 2 doesn't really have the ability to do that as well. It's not really built for it, and able to survey movements and sustain a lot of direct damage. I mean, the Freelancer probably could do that, probably not as much direct damage, but it still can. And then the Freelancer's secondary use to insert or rescue people from combat zones. This is something that also the Freelancer 2 could do. So they didn't really say how it compares. They just sort of talked about the Terrapin, and I feel they kind of just avoided that question slightly. So next question is, what will the travel range be like on the Terrapin? And the answer is very long. The Terrapin packs much bigger hydrogen and quantum fuel tanks to increase its operational range. It's designed to stay out in the verse for as long as possible. So this is kind of typical with any exploration ship, especially the ships that are built for exploration and not built into exploration. Because obviously if you're exploring the verse, you don't want to run out of fuel halfway through a jump. So moving on to the next question. The next question is, can the Terrapin, as envisioned in the concept sale, carry any cargo? If so, how much in SCU? So obviously on the stat page for the concept, we got no cargo information whatsoever. We didn't get a 0, but we just got a blank space. It just wasn't filled in, which left everybody sort of speculating, can it be used as a cargo hauler, including myself, because I would love this as a cargo hauler. The answer to this is no, there is no official cargo capacity for the Terrapin. I will say though that players can put down cargo wherever they choose, allowing salvage to be dropped in the rear if they can find space for it. But loose cargo and salvage will not be as safe, and those inside dedicated cargo holds on other ships will not be as safe, and those I think that's meant to be will not be as safe as those inside dedicated cargo holds of other ships. Transporting loose cargo is done at a pilot's risk, but is not recommended. So the answer to that is sort of yes and no. No, it cannot be designed to carry cargo, but yes, you can just plonk cargo down. So really that just sort of covers up any speculation of it being a cargo ship. It's possible, but it's not something you're going to want to do. It's going to be dangerous, obviously, as they mentioned here with loose cargo. It's not going to be held down. So as you're flying around, I'm assuming it's also going to move around. It's going to smash around. You're probably going to damage the inside of your ship or the cargo. You're not going to be a reliable cargo ship, but it is possible if you happen to find something interesting. So the next question is, how maneuverable are you planning to make this ship to be in space and atmosphere? So obviously this is quite the question, because it just looks like a big sack of metal. So maneuverability is probably going to be an issue. So the answer to this is the Terrapin is solid, heavy, and therefore somewhat slow to accelerate. Turning takes time in both space and atmosphere. In combat scenarios, Terrapin pilots are also encouraged to focus on escape techniques other than simply running, relying on the ship's defensive capabilities rather than trying to outmaneuver their opponent. Ultimately, though, Advanced threat detection and avoidance is preferred strategy for most capable Terrapin drivers or pilots. Due to its superior scanning capabilities in storms and bad flying conditions planetside, their increased maneuverability is needed to brake for orbit. Pilots may wish to lock the ship down and ride it out. So yeah, that was kind of expected, at least from I kind of expected it to be very sluggish, because the thrusters aren't that big and the weight is extremely high, so that wasn't really a surprise. Now, the ability to lock it down and ride out a storm sounds interesting. I'm not sure if that's something that just the Terrapin's going to be able to do, or if all ships are going to be able to lock down to the ground. But again, I don't know if they just mean landing it on the ground and not actually locking it down. There's nothing that's actually sort of dug into the ground, but that would be cool. So moving on to the next question. And the next question is, how does the Terrapin have any docking abilities with other ships or stations? And the answer is no. There are no docking rings on the Terrapin. Pilots wanting to dock will need to land and travel on foot through the boarding ramp. So this is, at least for me, kind of obvious. It's built to be survivable, so obviously a docking ring would just make a weak point, similar to how the ejection seats would also have a weak point. So that was kind of expected, at least for me. And the next question is, does the Terrapin have a bed? Yes, for long-range missions, the pilot could potentially be spending days, if not weeks and months, out of port. In fact, you can even see it in the corner of the cutaway image. So, answer to that is yes, it does have a bed, but it sounds like it's only got one bed, and this is a two-person ship. So, does that mean that the crew member is not going to be able to also stay out with you? Or are you going to be able to sort of take turns sleeping in the bed, but then you're not actually making use of the multi-crew? So I'm not sure if they're going to add another bed for the crew, or if it's just going to always be a one bed thing, or if we have the option to add a bed, who knows. But coming on to the final question, what do you envision will attach to the utility hardpoints beyond scanning devices? Mining lasers, salvage claws, additional weapons, ? So the utility mounts fit equipment rather than anything offensive. Something we're going to be seeing more as further support and non-combat ships are revealed. The Terrapin's radar dish and scanning array will enhance the range and capabilities of the installed radar and scanner, making it far more capable than one without. But as utility gear is revealed, the usefulness of an armored utility platform like the Terrapin will grow. So that just clears up any sort of speculation of making this a fighting ship or an offensive ship. I personally still think it's possible, just with its massive weapon. I think fighting would be something that you could do. You couldn't really dogfight, given by what we know of its maneuverability, but I assume you could sort of stay on the outskirts of a battlefield and fight that way. So this is the cutaway image that the second to last question was talking about, and you can see the bed just over here in the back corner, and it is just one bed. There might be a bed above it that might turn into a bed, or they might get rid of this, because this sort of looks like a bit of, I mean, that looks like cargo to me, which is why I was hoping this could be a cargo ship. But yeah, at least on this concept, there is only one bed. So the crew is, well, the crew is shit out of luck. He's going to have to find somewhere to sleep while you sleep, and then sort of get to your ship again, which would be a massive hassle. So I do hope they add a second bed, and that would just kill it for me if they didn't. So do I think the Anvil Terrapin is worth it? So in my first video, I kind of said I don't think it's worth the price for $195. I think it's too limited and it's just not really special enough for a price like that. And has this Q&A changed my opinion on that? No, I don't think my opinion's changed. I think personally for me, the 195 is just too much for how limited it is. When you consider something like the Freelancer Duo, which, yeah, it might not be as survivable, but it's a lot more versatile, it's a lot more modular, you can do a lot more with it, you can change it a lot more, you could pretty much do any role, whereas this is fixed, set into exploration or reconnaissance. You cannot change it to be anything other than that. And that just sort of kills it for me for being worth it. However, obviously, if you are the kind of person that wants something that is a dedicated exploration reconnaissance ship, then yeah, I think it will be worth it. I think it'll be perfectly capable. I think it's probably going to be one of the best, if not the best, at its role. And that role is being a reconnaissance ship, exploration ship that can take a beating. You know, obviously this Q&A sort of elaborated a bit more on how much of a beating it can take. And the fact that it talks about going against a fleet, you know, observing a fleet's movements and then be able to take a ton of fire from a fleet and still get out, just makes me assume it probably is extremely durable. It's going to be able to take an unreal amount of damage before it actually dies. So, I mean, for that, I suppose it makes it worth it. It's got a big gun. It's got heavy armor. You could probably be a bit creative and use it, like I say, as somewhat a fighter, as long as you sort of stay on the outskirts and you just sort of be a pest rather than a dogfighter. But yeah, that's my verdict on the Anvil Terrapin, and this has been the Q&A for the Anvil Terrapin, and I will see you guys in the next video. Laters, taters.